Jack is an angry man.
Come on down to Angry Jack's Shell Emporium! Angry Jack's!
His off-brand pizzeria is burning through money like a faulty oven. So when his employees introduce a new machine called the Puppet Carver that can turn wooden logs into fully functioning animatronics, naturally, Jack is dismissive and skeptical.
Jack's angry!
But will a near-fatal accident with the machine, plus a disturbing encounter with a mysterious entity, be enough to make him change his outlook on life? Reviewing this series, I've read good stories, I've read bad stories, I've read stories that were frustrating, aggravating, confusing, and all other sorts of ing words. But this is the first story I've read that's confused. Let me explain. But before we get to the negatives, what are the good parts of this story? Well, I always love a Scroogian redemption arc, even though this one's a bit more clunky than previous ones I've read. The story also features a unique narrative style that was a pleasant surprise. So basically, while Jack is learning to feel like empathy and love, we get interspliced excerpts from a novel that a side character is working on about a wooden puppet who comes to life and also learns to feel. The parallel symbolism is obvious, and the novel bits just read like another Fazbear Fright, but I appreciate that the writers went and tried something new, especially considering that the storytelling in Fazbear Fright so far has been pretty typical. The big problem with the Puppet Carver, however, is that I don't think it even knows what it's doing. So, the near-fatal accident I talked about was Jack crawling into the machine to investigate a weird noise, and all of a sudden the saw blades go off, but they, stop just before they hack him up. That's the incident that kind of makes him, appreciate the value of life. It's then that he's stalked by the aforementioned entity, which is revealed to be another version of Jack, but this time made entirely out of Fazgoo. Yeah, remember Fazgoo? Are we so happy that it's back again? No, I'm fucking not. The Fazgoo Jack touches Real Jack and transfers all the pain Real Jack had inflicted on the people in his life, and then... I don't know. What the hell happened? Was it the Real Jack or the Fazgoo Jack that crawled out of the machine? And was the entity Fazgoo Jack, or was it Real Jack in the process of being denatured by the Fazgoo? There's no indication that Real Jack changed at all when he exited the machine, with the exception of his attitude, but then the machine's inventor, Porter, opens it up at the end and finds that there's mysterious entrails inside the machine. Was that Fazgoo? Or was that Jack's guts, basically? Did Porter, incorporate Fazgoo into the Puppet Carver? Did it sneak its way in there somehow? Now, people have many different interpretations for this story, and the most common one is the one I also agree with. What I think happened is that it was Fazgoo Jack that crawled out of the Puppet Carver. Real Jack died inside of it and was replaced with the Fazgoo Jack. And that the entity that stalks him and transfers all the pain to Fazgoo Jack was the Real Jack, in the process of getting denatured by the Fazgoo. For what purpose? Probably as revenge, or maybe to kind of teach Fazgoo Jack a lesson about what can happen if he's a jerk to other people. But of course, there's still a few problems with this theory. Firstly, the story doesn't really make clear that anything happened to Jack at all inside the machine. It talks about the saw blades stopping and the machine emitting foul-smelling smoke, but the blades don't touch him and there's no clear sign of being open to interpretation. It's kind of an oxymoron, but whatever. And if there was supposed to be, then I'm more inclined to blame the fast-paced, cut-and-dry writing style we've typically seen in the Fazbear Frights. Second, the Fazgoo, as we saw in He Told Me Everything, takes hours to integrate with its host. But in the Puppet Carver, there's no indication that there's a significant passage of time between when Jack enters the Puppet Carver and when he exits the Puppet Carver. Again, if that was the intention, I honestly just blame the writing style again. Plus, if the Fazgoo creature was Real Jack, it's inconsistent with the level of control we've previously seen Fazgoo victims have over their new bodies. Guy got turned into Fazgoo 15 minutes ago and already he's acting like Flat Stanley. Side note, I scoped the FNAF novel wiki to try and find some answers, but not only did it not provide answers, but it also suggested that Chris from He Told Me Everything was in the Puppet Carver as the Phasgoo creature. Seriously, fuck you. I'm not even going to consider that. With a story like this, ambiguous plot points and interpretation are one thing, but when the writing style is just so basic and straightforward and the story like haphazardly corkscrews its own continuity, it turns from confusing to confused. I don't know what the intent was with this one. I don't know if there was like a transcription error between Scott and the author, or if the frustrating vagueness was the point. But regardless, I've dedicated way too much time to this story already, a story that's really just mediocre. Next. Colton wants to win enough tickets to buy a gaming console featured behind the price counter at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and he believes that an arcade game called the Ticket Pulverizer is the key to scoring the jackpot. Upon realizing the game is rigged in favor of younger kids, Colton breaks into the restaurant one night to make a few alterations for himself. But he's quick to discover that something doesn't want him there. And for good reason. This story is another mixed bag. What are the good things about it? Well, Colton, despite being another douchebag protagonist, actually has character beyond acting like a jerk. His father's death is what embittered him. He's an engineering genius, and I really liked the interactions between him and his uncle Mike, who's a car mechanic. I enjoyed Coils the Birthday Clown too, how at first he was framed to be this like vicious predator, but it turns out he was legitimately concerned for Colton's safety when he was hacking the game. And he actually sheds a tear when Colton dies. Spoiler alert. Seriously, who programs a birthday clown animatronic for kids to cry? But it was a nice change of pace to see an animatronic in the series that wasn't malicious. But the bad? So, Colton obsesses with beating this game and winning enough tickets, and he breaks into the restaurant at night to try and fix it in his favor. I mean, that's alright, I guess. Until you realize that ultimately his goal is to get the console, not beat the game. So, why didn't you just break into the restaurant and then find where they're keeping the tickets and steal some that way? You're already in there, you have all the tools at your disposal. I mean, why not just like take a few rolls and just add that to your collection? I understand this is an obsessive character and he's fixated on his ego and coming out on top over a perceived injustice. But it's just another indicator of how difficult it is to write these unlikable protagonists and also surmount any obvious plot holes. You read stuff like this and it turns your protagonist from intriguing to frustrating. And again, I also recognize that a kid randomly showing up with thousands of tickets might raise suspicion, especially if the staff like cross-checked and realized the numbers didn't add up. But then again, rigging an arcade game to shower yourself specifically with tickets would also raise suspicion, so really, Colton was screwed either way. In the climax, Coils the Birthday Clown tries to stop Colton from entering the machine. It's more like a booth than an actual arcade game, and Colton just has the most like casual reaction to trying to like ward off this demented robot clown who clearly doesn't want him there. Like, kid, how thick are you? The fact that this robot clown is patrolling the restaurant at night and trying to physically drag you out of the place should have been your first clue that maybe this was a bad idea. Again, I'm gonna blame the rushed, almost casual writing style for this. I do totally believe that Colton's character would have an obsession so burning that he would do like literally anything to try and break this game, but you really don't get a sense of that from the text. Good horror is experiential, and if you're going to like write like this, where it seems more like you're recalling a story than telling a story, then yeah, some things are gonna get lost in translation. Oh yeah, the ending. Colton gets trapped underneath the booth and he gets crushed by the machinations when it's activated the next morning. Who could have seen that coming? Jump for Tickets had a few more highlights than the Puppet Carver, but like the Puppet Carver, it also had its share of frustrating aspects that kept it from becoming enjoyable. I seriously feel like I've ranted about these stories much longer than necessary, but these in particular seem to spin like a particularly wicked yarn that just seemed to require more time to unravel. And spoiler alert, the next story is no exception. The class field trip at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Factory isn't cool enough for Peyton and Marley. Desperate to find some excitement, they sneak onto a catwalk overlooking massive vats of tomato sauce. And excitement they find when Marley seems to fall over the edge and plunges straight into one of the boiling cauldrons. Shocked and burdened with a guilty conscience, Peyton withholds the true extent of Marley's fate. But that fate might have come back in the form of a pizza that Peyton has to eat. One that tastes horribly familiar. Oh boy, this one. Yeah, I had problems. Let's dive right in. Firstly, what was your reason for not saying that Marley actually fell off a catwalk and into a boiling cauldron of tomato sauce? Let's consult the book. What if she told Mrs. Crutchfield, but the old woman said it was Peyton's fault for not talking Marley down? Or what if one of her classmates accused Peyton of pushing Marley in? Marley was beautiful and popular. It wouldn't be long before kids started to talk. Maybe they think Peyton was jealous, and there had been no one there to see it besides Peyton herself. As if a switch had flipped on, Peyton felt herself going into full preservation mode. It was too late to save Marley, but maybe she could at least save herself. Dumbass! Yet another contrived, nonsensical thought process to ensure that this story could actually progress the way it did. Again, maybe if we were given more time to explore the characters and their various neuroses, maybe this little stunt would have been more believable. But this isn't just turning your brain off. This is taking your brain, dumping it into the trash can, and then setting the can on fire. So later, Peyton has to eat a pizza that came from the factory, and she's convinced that the pizza she has to eat contains essence of Marley. I will say that this whole sequence has some really good disgusting imagery in it, where Peyton likens all the different ingredients to blood and tongue. Good stuff. And predictably, eating the Marley pizza has some horrifying effects on Peyton later that night, when she becomes convinced that Marley is actually alive in some form or another, trying to escape from her guts. This whole climax just did not sit well with me. There's some imagery in here that's disturbingly similar to In the Flesh, where it talks about the character's stomach expanding and something pushing up from inside it. In the Flesh, I called it borderline fetishistic, but here it's happening to a 14-year-old girl. I mean, I don't know if it's just me, but I felt really icky reading that. Not in a good way either. But ignoring all that, what is this girl's first instinct when she's convinced that she ate the ghost of her best friend and she feels something pushing up from inside her skin, beating her, trying to rip its way out, and her belly is, and I'm quoting the book here, swelling like a balloon? Ugh. What is the first thing she tries to do? Oh, it's a tapeworm. I gotta lure it out with a raw piece of meat on my tongue. This girl's gotta be a fucking Vietnam War vet to be so jaded against such eldritch horrors. Seriously, this is just another case where the potential for real horror is there, and you just cast it aside in favor of just your cut and dry writing style. Disgraceful. Also, I made an amazing discovery. So, the story details that what gave Peyton the idea to put a piece of raw meat on her tongue to lure out the tapeworm was the fact that she had seen it on a nonfiction TV show about parasites and parasite removal. Naturally, I called bullshit and looked up whether or not you could actually lure out a tapeworm with a piece of meat on your tongue. And you know what? The only reference I could find to this dubious factoid was an Amy Schumer movie where they do the exact same procedure to get a tapeworm out of Amy Schumer's throat. And spoiler alert, you cannot lure a tapeworm out of your body with a piece of meat. Just admit it, Ellie Cooper. You saw that scene in the Amy Schumer movie Snatched, and you presented it in the Fazbear Frights book under the guise of it being in a serious non-fiction television show about parasites. Oh my god. These Fazbear Frights are gonna kill me. Oh my god. No! But that's not the worst part. Turns out Marley was alive the whole time. Wait, what? How exactly do you get away with falling off a catwalk, which the story admits would leave you with several broken bones at least, go missing for 3 days, and then just walk back into the story like nothing happened? Maybe the book can explain it better than me. I just flipped back to the page about the stomach inflation. Ugh, fuck. Being missing had been kind of fun. No school, no responsibilities, but hiding out in the pizza factory had started to get old. She missed her boyfriend, missed regular meals, and missed sleeping in her own bed. Nope! Is she Fazgoo? Was that a vat of Fazgoo she actually fell into? Are we supposed to just write off every stupid story decision in Fazbear Frights as Fazgoo? Also, Peyton ends up actually falling off a roof and fucking dying. Irony again. Ugh, my head hurts. But you know what? I'm not done with this story. There's still something about it that, in my view, is actually about 100 times worse than anything I've talked about. And I'm going to try and go off the cuff here, just to emphasize how serious I am about this. And forgive me if I start to ramble, but it's something I'm very passionate about, like as a writer. So, reading the Fazbear Frights, I noticed like a few typos. And you'd think that in like, you know, professionally, like, you know, published books like this, you wouldn't expect to find typos, but you'd be surprised. I actually find typos in like a lot of, you know, traditionally published books by famous authors. When you're reading all these words, all these like, you know, letters and characters, you know, finding one or two in a book is to be expected. I get it, you know. People make mistakes. People aren't 100% perfect. You could show like a paper that has like a typo to like 100 different people, and it's likely that they wouldn't, you know, be able to pick it out. That's likely. That said, however, we as writers, and more broadly speaking, all of you probably as students, former students, you know, current students, you know, you are like expected to have this like air of perfection in your writing, whether it's creative writing or writing for an essay or something like that. You know, typos and formatting errors are you usually get docked points off, and that's why, you know, even as early as first grade, teachers tell you to like, you know, always proofread your work, always edit your work. Because, you know, if they find out that you, you know, misspelled a word, or you had a formatting error, or you know, spelled something wrong, or, you know, swapped one name with another, then yeah, they're going to take points off. You're not going to get a perfect 100. You know, you could be saying something good, but you're not going to get that perfect score because you had a few typos. So that's why it does irritate me when I see typos in books, like professionally published books like this. You know, typos aren't, you know, in the big scheme of things, they're really like not a big deal, but there are some things in Pizza Kit that graduated from typos to technical errors. Like actual things wrong with the way the story is written that have potential to change the actual meaning of the story. There are a few instances, at least, where Peyton and Marley's names are swapped. It's not just in the book, too. It's not just in the text. It's also, like, on the back cover. Marley's best friend goes missing on the tour of the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Factory. Not only that, but there's also an instance where let me look it up. I actually have to look it up this time because I just have to like make sure I'm getting it right. There is a line of dialogue conveyed in thought from Peyton that is written in the third person. It's italicized and it's formatted as if it's a thought, but it's written in the third person. So not only is stuff like this like serious and does technically break the story, but these are super fucking obvious mistakes that could have been caught with any competent editor or proofreader. Hell, even a beta reader could have caught these mistakes. And I don't really want to blame Scott Cawthon or Ellie Cooper for this because, like I said, you know, writers make mistakes, humans make mistakes, but when you have, I presume, a team of editors and a professional publishing outlet like Scholastic or AFK Books or whatever, which is, I think it's a subsidiary of Scholastic, when you have a team like that attached to a written property, which happens to be like one of the biggest video game franchises of all time, I'm sorry, I expect perfection. I expect professionalism. And to see these errors that an elementary school kid would not make in this book, it really irritates me. There are so many aspiring like writers out there who like just can't make it. And they could have the greatest story, they could have the greatest pitch, but you know, even something like a typo or a mistake in the writing is enough to turn off an agent or a publisher. You are pretty much expected to be perfect, you know, as a first impression goes. It is something I'm passionate about. Like if this were like fan fiction or just, you know, some like random creepypasta, you know, I'd be more forgiving. But like I said, professional book, you know, professional team behind it, you know, big franchise that demands attention and like respect, it's not good. It tells me that this was rushed. It tells me that this was not given the treatment it deserved. It tells me that, worst case scenario, they were more concerned with getting out a large number of books and making a profit rather than making sure that the stories actually made sense. Does not sit well with me at all. All that considered, I think it's safe to say that Pizza Kit is by far the worst like Fazbear Fright I've read so far. Like it's truly like bottom of the barrel, like scraping off the font at the bottom levels. Like all the bad things about Fazbear Frights and all the bad things about horror writing in general, you'll find them in Pizza Kit. Stitch Wraith, Larson finds out that the blood in the ball pit came from 2 different decades. You know, we could have guessed that because we already saw the time-traveling ball pit, and Jake is comforting this girl named Renelle when really she's Eleanor. Can't wait to see where that goes. Honestly, my head hurts. I'm done recording. There's 3 books left. I can't imagine them getting worse than this. See you all next time.